Capital cities. Every country has one. Well, except Nauru and Switzerland. Some countries have states and territories with their own capitals, like Australia. Except these territories rely on the federal government to make laws for them, so their capital is essentially the federal capital. At least some countries are simple and have one capital, like the Netherlands with Amsterdam and Malaysia with Kuala Lumpur. But these countries actually have two capitals. So what is going on here? Why do some countries have multiple capitals? First, let's define what a capital is, as it can get confusing, especially when talking about countries with multiple capitals. For the sake of this video, we are going to ignore countries whose capitals are in transition, like South Korea and Indonesia, as they will replace the current capital eventually. This does not include cities where only judicial courts are located, except for if they are officially stated to be a capital city, like South Africa. Firstly, capitals can be defined by law or their constitution to be their capital. For example, in the United States, the Resident Act of 1790 made Washington DC the capital of the United States. Capitals can also be defined as capitals if the seat of government, basically where the country's leaders work, or certain federal government processes are located there. So, to qualify for this list, it has to either be capital by law or house federal government processes like Parliament. There are also three different types of capitals. These are administrative capitals, which is where the law is carried out, for example, the White House in America. Legislative capitals, which hold the places where legislation is created, like the German Parliament, the Bundestag. And judicial capitals, which is where the highest national courts of the country are located. So, let's begin the list. Firstly, we have Afghanistan, also known as the country with the most flag changes in 100 years, a great sign of stability. And in 2021, its flag changed again as the Taliban won the civil war. Now, the Taliban has retained Kabul as the official Afghani capital. I mean, it's the most populous city, has the best infrastructure, and even has its own shiny parliament building just sitting around being unused. But all the gangsters know real shit goes down in Kandahar. This is because Kandahar is the de facto capital of Afghanistan, as the leadership council meets there and the supreme leader lives there, and these are the only people with any sort of power in Afghanistan. But why this city? Well, Kandahar is the birthplace and sort of spiritual centre of the Taliban. The Taliban was created shortly after the Soviet-Afghan War. During the war, Kandahar experienced guerrilla warfare, with the Mujahideen putting up heavy resistance to Soviet Afghanistan. And after heavy bombing and seizures by the Soviets, the population of Kandahar was reduced from 200,000 to 25,000. Yeah, it was kinda bad. After the war, the city completely collapsed, which sowed the soil for a new jihadist terrorist group to emerge, the Taliban. In 1994, the city was captured and made the headquarters of the Taliban, and 2 years later, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan was formed. Since then, Kandahar has retained the status as home of the Taliban, and since around 2023, has been the de facto capital of Afghanistan. Benin is a former French colony located in West Africa. Benin has two capitals, its official capital, Porto Novo, and its de facto capital, Cotonou, which is also its largest city. Porto Novo has been the capital ever since it was colonised by France. So why does Cotonou house the seat of government? Well, it's mainly due to practicality. Despite Porto Novo meaning new port in Portuguese, it's a pretty bad port city as you have to go through Cotonou to access it. And at that point, why wouldn't you just drop the goods at Cotonou? Also, for a less economically developed country like Benin, it is just way more economical to have your seat of government in the biggest city. Plus, the president gets a nice oceanfront view. Bolivia is an interesting country because not only does it have two capitals, but it also has two flags. You have the normal Bolivia flag and then the cool checkerboard rainbow flag used to represent the indigenous people of the Andes. But let's get back on track. Bolivia has two capitals. Sucre is the official constitutional capital, while La Paz is the administrative capital. I always thought it was the other way around, and I'm sure you did as well. But it turns out Sucre was originally supposed to be the only capital. This changed during the Bolivian Civil War, where conservatives and liberals fought for control of the country. Americans don't get any ideas. The liberals were upset with what conservatives were doing in government, so things got pretty heated. And so, civil war began, and the liberals won. The liberals then attempted to move the capital to La Paz, but it turns out moving a capital is harder than it seems. In the end, La Paz became the de facto administrative capital, and this remains the case to this day. Next up we have Eswatini, a landlocked country completely at the mercy of South Africa and Mozambique. Well, it could be worse. Eswatini is an absolute monarchy, which means King Mswiti III gets to do whatever he wants. Eswatini has, believe it or not, 2 capitals, with these being Mbabane, the administrative capital, and Lobamba, the legislative capital. Lobamba is the home of the king, and houses the Senate and House of Assembly of Eswatini. But why this city? Well, Lobamba has been where the king of Eswatini has lived for centuries, and considering that Eswatini is an absolute monarchy, it is practical and efficient to place other government buildings nearby, so the king can easily make decisions regarding laws. Our 5th country is Malaysia, with the capital cities of Kuala Lumpur and Putrajaya. Kuala Lumpur is a massive city today, but when it started out, it was a tiny village. It was founded back in the early 1800s and remained a reasonably small town with a population of around 4,500 people in 1884. In 1880, the capital of the colony of Selangor changed from Klang to Kuala Lumpur, and in 1890, Kuala Lumpur became the capital of the Federated Malay States, the precursor to modern-day Malaysia. This sped up the city's population growth, and it now houses 7.5 million people. This was becoming a problem for the Malaysian government. This is because most of the government buildings were scattered seemingly at random around the city, and this was super inefficient, especially due to how congested the densely populated city was becoming. So, they decided to build a new capital called Putrajaya, and they moved all the government buildings over there except for the parliament and the king's residence. Malaysia has also kept Kuala Lumpur as the official constitutional capital, despite Putrajaya being the seat of government. Say it with me, guys. The Netherlands has 2 capitals. These are Amsterdam being the constitutional capital and The Hague being the seat of government. The strange thing about this situation is that it isn't new at all. The Hague has held the seat of government ever since Dutch independence in 1588. And it was only until 1815, after the Napoleonic Wars, where Amsterdam was recognised as the official Dutch capital. Although, this was only mentioned in the constitution after the 1983 revision, which states, "The king shall be sworn in and inaugurated as soon as possible in the capital city, Amsterdam." But why these 2 cities? Well, the Dutch were under the rule of the Spanish ever since the late 1300s, and the Netherlands ran like you would expect any medieval nation to run, by about 15,000 different noblemen. These noblemen had to meet somewhere, so the Spanish chose Brussels, a trend that continues to this very day. Eventually, the Dutch got sick of Spanish rule and decided to break away, and as a result of this, they lost the southern provinces, which contained Brussels. So the newly independent Netherlands had to choose somewhere else to meet up, and they chose The Hague, as it had no other political assimilations at the time. As time went on, Amsterdam became the most important city, and after the Napoleonic Wars, the king said, "Wait, why don't we just make Amsterdam the capital?" And from that point on, Amsterdam and The Hague were both capitals of the Netherlands. South Africa has not 1, not 2, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 8, but 3 capitals. It's the only country on this list to have more than 2 capitals. These capitals are Cape Town, the legislative capital, Bloemfontein, the judicial capital, and Pretoria, the administrative capital. But why these cities? Well, firstly, they have good locations, so they are spread evenly across South Africa, and secondly, history. To understand the historical aspect, we have to go back to 1795, when France invaded the Low Countries. In response to this, Britain declared war on France. After the Dutch Republic had been occupied, the British decided to occupy the Dutch Cape Colony in a friendly invasion. But after the Napoleonic Wars, when the Netherlands had been reinstated, the British didn't give the Cape Colony back and kept it for itself. This understandably pissed off the Dutch settlers, who moved inland and set up their own republics, the most significant of which being the Orange Free State and the South African Republic. These republics existed until the start of the 20th century, when the British decided to invade and actually win this time. After 2 years of fighting, the British won, and in 1910 created the Union of South Africa. Shortly afterwards, there was a power struggle over who would get the capital, but in the end, everyone won and got their own capital, except for the natal colony who got nothing. Last but not least, we have Sri Lanka with its 2 capitals, Colombo, the executive and judicial capital, and Sri Jaya, the official legislative capital. Sri Lanka has a similar situation to Malaysia, where its original capital has gotten too congested to be able to pass laws practically. Because of this, Sri Lanka decided to move its capital from Colombo to the nearby suburb of Sri Jaya. The only building that didn't move was the President's House, making it the administrative capital. So those are all the 8 countries with more than one capital and why. Thank you so much for watching. This is my first video on the channel and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have feedback or if I've missed a country, please leave it in the comments and I will see you next time.